a great announcement today regarding Arizona Eco Development. Before we get started, I want to make some introductions. We have some council members with us today. Mayor Pro Tem Billy Orr is here, Councilman Steve Sischka, Councilmember Kathy Rusing. We have Councilwoman Alexa Scholl and Councilman Phil Good. So thank you for being here. We have some staff members and a few community members. The Prescott Downtown Partnership and the Prescott Chamber of Commerce are represented with Sherry and MJ. So thanks for being here today. So we've been at work with Arizona Eco Development. We've had 3 different executive sessions on the topic of Arizona Eco Development and the ongoing negotiations. I can tell you that this council is very motivated to get a deal put together. I can tell you that every council member has worked very hard, has come up with some great ideas, and has contributed to what you're going to see today in this deal. So I'm grateful for the collaboration and teamwork on our council, and appreciate you all and what you've done to help get us to this point. This has been about 2 years, just short of 2 years that we've been at this, which is pretty amazing. I never thought that we would still be sitting here working on this. But I'm grateful for the persistence of the applicant, of the council, and of our stakeholders that have worked very hard and not given up. I know there's times we've thrown our hands up in the air and thought, is this ever going to happen? But I'm grateful for the persistence of everyone that's been a part of this. And I would tell you that this is a win-win-win deal. Not everybody is getting everything they want here, but I truly believe that the applicant feels really good about this deal. I know the city, the council, we feel very good about the deal, and our stakeholders feel very good about what we have in this current deal. And so it truly is a win-win-win. I think in any good deal, you're going to walk away not getting everything you wanted, and that's just the nature of putting together a deal. I want to thank the applicant, Stuart Swanson and Jason Giese, who's worked for Stuart on this. They have been very generous. You're going to see when we look at this deal, very, very generous, and I'm grateful to Stuart Swanson and to Jason Giese for their generosity and all the work that they've put into this, willing to stick with us and be patient and persevere through this. So thank you to those gentlemen for all the work that they've put into this. Of course, I want to thank the council again just for all your hard work. And then I want to thank the stakeholders. We've had some tremendous partners in our community that have worked very hard on this. And namely, Save the Dells has been a very important part of getting this deal together. I can tell you that I'm not sure that we would have the number of acres around the Point of Rocks without the help of Save the Dells. And so I want to thank Amber Fields and her whole team for all that they've done, and again, working with us through this whole process. They've done a tremendous job of influencing the deal, and I want to say thank you to all of our stakeholders, including Save the Dells. I would say today that while we're not crossing the finish line today, I think we can see it. Finally, we've got a way forward and a path to move forward. So while we're not crossing the finish line today, I believe we can see it from where we're sitting. So what you're going to see today is a non-binding letter of intent. So this is an opportunity for the council and the applicant to come together on the major deal points and put together a letter of intent that really creates the cornerstones of the deal. So you're not going to see a lot of detail today. There are things here that you're going to say, maybe something's missing here or there, and we totally get that. We would agree with you. What we're trying to do is get together on just the major points of the deal and see if we could come together, and we did, we believe, come together on the major deal points. And so this is going to look somewhat basic or general in some cases, but that was intentional. We intentionally wanted to see if we can't get together on the major deal points, then we're done. And fortunately, we were able to get together on those major deal points. So consider these the cornerstones of the deal with more details to come, because this does not supersede or preempt the normal process for any annexation into the city. There will be the normal Prop 400 influenced public process that will happen. This was just an opportunity to see if there was proof of life. Do we have the opportunity to move forward? And I think as much as anyone, the applicant wanted to know, should I continue to spend time and money on this deal? And so that's why we put the LOI together. It's just a precursor to the normal process that'll happen based on Prop 400. So let me get into the basics here and just start by saying, and if you want a headline, this is probably it. The city will be receiving 745 acres, which includes 475 acres of the iconic granite dells around the Point of Rocks, and in exchange for 378 acre-feet of water. And that's a net. We'll get into the details when we look at the LOI. But we're receiving 745 acres for 378 acre-feet of water. So it's a tremendous deal for the city, and I'm very pleased that we're sitting where we are. Keep in mind that the 475 acres in and around the Point of Rocks really creates an 1,100 acre contiguous municipally owned park, which is pretty unique. There's very few that large in the Southwest. We're one of the largest in the Southwest. So at this point, I'd like to put up the maps, and let's start with the north first. So the North Annexation sometimes is much overlooked. In my opinion, it's equally as important as the South. What you see here on the North Annexation is the pink color up there, the odd-shaped color. That's 270 acres that we will receive in this deal, deeded directly to the city of Prescott. That will be benefiting the airport, particularly for a buffer around the runway. And then the kind of light orange color there inside of that is 131 acres of land that we will do a friendly condemnation with the landowner, the applicant, to, can we see it okay?
Yeah, just trying to do it.
Okay. So that light orange would be a friendly condemnation. We'd work with the landowner, and we anticipate that about 95% of the cost of that property would be paid for by the FAA through a grant process. I want to bring Joe Baines up, who's with our Parks and Rec department, and just talk a little bit about what else is going on in this annexation that's important, I think, for trails and open space.
Okay, Mayor, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. John, if you could put up the map that shows the trail. One of the things that has really not been talked about a lot on the North Annexation is the ability for us to connect the Peavine Trail to Chino Valley. So on the map behind me, you'll see a proposed connection that would happen through easements that will be part of the deal with Arizona Eco. There are some state trust lands involved in that we'll have to go through the process with. In fact, we are in the process on those. But largely in effect, what it'll have is the ability for us to connect to Chino Valley. We're already connected through the Iron King to Prescott Valley, so this gives us the opportunity for people to have choices as far as alternative forms of transportation, commuting to or from Chino, to or from Prescott Valley. So it really hasn't been talked about a lot, but it's really been a goal that the city's had for a long, long time, since the late 90s when the original Peavine was purchased. So we're really excited about this part of the opportunity, and that's just a small piece, but it's directly related to the North Annexation. Thank you. Okay, so the red right here is the existing Peavine Trail, the old railroad bed right there as it goes through under Highway 89. What we'll do through this easement is that blue line will connect and then connect up to Chino Valley up in this area right here. The blue squares are the state trust land, which we'll have to get the easements for, but again, we'll have to go around the existing railroad bed in this area here due to the runway extension for the airport, but then we'll quickly connect back to it. And again, I think that's a huge benefit for us to be able to connect our trail system to our neighboring communities.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. And then the other thing I want to note here is Section 33. You can see we go back to the north annexation? I'm sorry.
I think I'm going to do it on the camera because it seems to be a better view.
So not only do we get 270 acres plus the friendly condemnation of 131 acres around the airport, you can see the natural open space just to the south of that long green parcel. And then I wanted to point out section 33 in the lower right corner there. We're going to reference that later in the LOI as we get through this and talk about what's going to happen over there on section 33. Let's move to the south annexation, John. I don't know if people remember what this looked like previously. I don't know. Do you have the comparison
I do.
map? Let's
Wanna
throw
look at that first?
Yeah, let's throw that up first.
Okay.
You know, we forget almost 2 years ago with an initial application what the applicant brought to us, but it was significant development in and around the Point of Rocks, which is on the left side that you can see there. So we've come a long way. Let's go to the current map now, John, and what we're talking about here is 475 acres of deeded land in and around the Point of Rocks. This is the gem of the Dells. And to get all of the rocks, the Point of Rocks and all the rocks, in addition to that, No Name Creek is really a tremendous accomplishment to have that wildlife corridor. So again, I'd like Joe to come up and just orient us on the south annexation and highlight some things on this open space.
Thanks again, Mayor. First, I'd like to point to the 2009 Open Space Master Plan that was approved by Council and some of the characteristics that were pointed out that were important in open space acquisitions. The ecological values, which this has a lot. The riparian forest that's included in this, I think, is kind of understated, but it's really awe-inspiring when you get out there. It's old cottonwood trees, and it really is a riparian forest, which is really unique to the Southwest. The hydrological, the water, No Name Creek that goes through there, again, something that you don't see a lot in the Southwest, or at least in the high country here. Cultural and historical, the ranching history in here, the 1.4 billion year old rock formations that we have included in this. The buffer that it provides, the scale, by scale I mean the scenic vistas that we have, the visual backdrops which are awe-inspiring. The connectivity of open space was pointed out in 2009. This, as the mayor pointed out, will connect us to 1,100 contiguous acres on the east side of Highway 89 that includes Watson Woods, Watson Lake, the Peavine Trail, which is a national recreation trail. So it hits all the check marks on that. The recreational potential, horseback riding, hiking, mountain biking, bird watching, all of those things that it hits them on that. And the economic value, the visitation that it can create in our community really makes us a destination rather than a stop by on somebody's trip. So really the opportunities in here are just breathtaking and really epic in scale. So I will point to a couple things. Again, as I pointed out, and the mayor pointed out too, this No Name Creek is a significant waterway that runs through there with cottonwoods that string and walnut trees that string out through here, all through this area here. And then, of course, you can kind of see the outline of the Dells. So we just drop off of those iconic rock formations and immediately enter into a great wildlife corridor that has water running in it almost year-round, tanks that are home to a lot of the migrating birds. Just tons of opportunity in there. I'd like to also point out to this park area. This is Highway 89 right here. As you go through the Dells, through this agreement, this piece of property here could provide some parking for a future park in here, which this has a lot of riparian qualities in it. I look at this as more of a park that we could have access for lower mobility folks to be able to access the Dells, whereas before it was a little hard from the trailheads being about 2 miles from getting into the Dells either way. This would also provide a trail from here straight over to the Peavine, probably a 4% kind of a grade, so easy to manipulate. And then you're really into the Dells, the heart of the Dells pretty quickly. So offering opportunities for folks that have less mobility maybe grandpa and grandma that want to take their grandkids out. Gives them the opportunity to access this crown jewel. So those are some of the main points. Point of Rocks, we talk about historic value. This was a railroad stop, back in the 30s. So this has a lot of historical value. Like I say, this hits all the check marks.
Thank you, Joe. Well, that's kind of a highlight on the maps of the 745 acres that the city will be receiving. Let me talk a little bit about the water that's outlined here in the LOI. So the actual give for the city of our potable water from our water portfolio is 753 acre feet of water. Now, I mentioned 378 net earlier, and I'll make that clear of how we get to that number as we move through this section in the LOI. So it's 753 acre feet of potable water. In the LOI, there's a breakdown of how we get to those numbers for the applicant. I think one of the key things to note here is the applicant can move density around within the annexations of the 753 acre feet of water, but it all has to move north. So any density, any more dense development has to go north. You can't increase the density in the south annexation parcel. And then with the water that we provide, the applicant will have to comply with all of our city water use rules and regulations. It's very important. We have a very strict water policy, and he'll have to comply with all of those water policies. AED shall pay all costs for water and sewer infrastructure, so all those costs will be borne by the developer. Section 33 I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the north annexation map. That section is a part of this grand deal, and it could remain in Yavapai County, could be annexed by Prescott, or it could be annexed into the town of Prescott Valley. That's yet to be determined. If it's not annexed into Prescott, so if it were to be annexed into Prescott Valley, the water use in Section 33 would incur a 30% surcharge, much like we do with Chino Valley currently. Whether Section 33 is annexed into Prescott Valley, or remains in Yavapai County, all effluent generated in Section 33 will be used for permanent recharge. I think this is very significant. It aligns with Prop 400. Any effluent that's generated from Section 33 will go to permanent recharge, and we know that on new development, about 90% of the water that goes to a household returns in recharge in the form of effluent. So about 90% on any new development, 90% will return to permanent recharge. In this section then, the last thing I'll mention here in the LOI is that the applicant has a current historic surface water right on Watson Lake. This came from the ranch property historically, and that's 375 acre feet of surface water rights on Watson Lake. And he is willing to sever and transfer that 375 acre feet of water to the city of Prescott. This is very significant. This gives us the opportunity to use that water for recreation or for recharge on Watson Lake, and it amounts to about 2 feet of surface water there on Watson Lake. So very significant give by the applicant again, which gets us back to that 370 acre feet net that the city is giving in this deal. In terms of roads and access, this section I'll just highlight that there is a Granite Creek crossing that extends the Phippen Trail from the Phippen Roundabout, the Phippen Trail Road, over to the east, over Granite Creek to connect to the Dells Ranch Road. That crossing will be paid for by impact fees for those developments around this road. So that will cross Granite Creek in that section there. And then there is a resort proposed. The resort location is on parcels K and L, which you can see here on the map just to the east of the Peavine Trail. Those two parcels will be where a high-end eco resort will be located. And so we think that's a real benefit to the city because of the TPT generated and the bed tax from that resort. Some portion of that bed tax will go to help maintain this municipal park here in the Granite Dells. The other thing notable is an at-grade crossing over and across the Peavine Trail. So let me just say that nearly 2 years ago, when this was initially proposed, there were up to 5 different trail crossings that we were looking at, which was not very exciting for our council, and we did not like that. So at this point, there's only one proposed. I've talked to Joe Baines a little bit about this. That crossing will go between parcels H and K there and cross the Peavine Trail. But we're hopeful, and I know this council desires that it's a separated crossing, so that in my view, because of the topo in that area, the vehicles could go under the trail and there could be a bridge for the trail, and that's kind of our desire. And we'll see what fleshes out in the details as we move forward, but we'd really like a separated grade crossing there across the Peavine Trail.
Mr. Mayor, can I interrupt you? Your mic is fading apparently.
Okay.
Can we just move you over to the podium? That'd be probably the easiest thing.
okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
that'd be great. Thank you.
It's fading.
Yeah, the batteries are dying,
Okay.
apparently. We keep leaving the batteries on.
Well, that was really everything in terms of the LOI that I was going to highlight. There's more details in there, but they're pretty straightforward. I think at this point we'll allow council members to make a few comments, and then after council members, we'll go to questions from the media. So let's bring up Mayor Pro Tem. Would you like to say a few things?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everyone, for being here. This is a great day for the city of Prescott. To combine what we have already with what we are anticipating receiving very soon is just fabulous, not only for our economy, but for our people that live here already. One of the things that I've always said about this is I want access for everyone. We don't want it to be for somebody that's only so fit that they can run all of this, right? We want this to be so that everybody will have access to it, and I think the way that we're planning it, that will actually happen. We've heard a lot over the last year, maybe even year and a half, about water policy, and we've done a lot on water policy, and I really want to appreciate our legal team that have helped us so much on that. But it's the water policy changes that have made this possible. This deal would not have happened had we not made those water policy changes. So I think that's really important to keep that in mind. And I just also want to recognize Michael Lamar and his team. We wouldn't be here today. There were times that some of us would have gone, we're done. Not really. We're all hanging in there. But Michael, your team was amazing, and we really appreciate it. And otherwise, we would not be here today. So I appreciate that. I also want to recognize Jason Giese. Jason, you saw where we started, and you saw where we are now. So it's a pretty amazing feat that he has come over this far. I'd like to finish one really quick story about Elizabeth Ruffner. So Michael, Joe Baines, and I were going to meet with Elizabeth Ruffner. I don't remember exactly when that was, Joe, but it was before her health began to fail her. And we went to her house with the map. It looked very similar to the map that we have today. And so we went and met with Elizabeth, but they came about 45 minutes late because they were making some quick changes to the map. And I had the opportunity to sit with Elizabeth for about 45 minutes and then watch her beam as Joe came in and Michael came in, and we shared the map with her because she was ecstatic that this was going to happen. You know, and Joe Baines has always been one of her favorite people. We all knew that. But I will tell you another person that she told me was also one of her favorite people, and that was Jason Giese. So she told me in that meeting, Jason will do the right thing on this. And you know what? We're all doing the right thing on this. So I just, Mayor, I appreciate this opportunity. And again, I want to thank the city. We are leaving an amazing legacy for decades and generations to come. So we just need to speed it up and get there, right, Mr. Shiska? Exactly. Thank you.
Ditto. You know, I've always said that you've got to be willing to give something up in order to get it, right, Council Member Orr, Councilwoman Orr? And I'm really glad that we didn't have to give this up in order to get it. I'd like to thank some people for this process. And it's been a long, arduous process, and there's probably been things said in private that I wouldn't want to repeat. But I also think that those things probably helped us get to where we're at right now. I'd like to thank the mayor for his measured approach to this situation. Greg, thank you so much. I'd like to thank Michael Lamar for his aha moment at 3 in the morning, talking to himself about how we could convert water into land. And Michael, thank you so much. I know that that's gone through several iterations, but in the end, it's all worked out. I'd like to thank Save the Dells. I'd like to thank the stakeholders, because truly, like the mayor said, it wouldn't look like it does today if it wouldn't have been for those organizations. And I can't say that I've always had good thoughts about those organizations, but I also understand that this is making sausage. And it went through several iterations, and we have gotten to a point where it tastes pretty good. So I'd like to thank those organizations. I'd like to thank my fellow council people, because we have gone through some interesting times in meetings. And once again, we have truly made this a really, really good situation for the city of Prescott for a long, long time to come. And so at last, the last thing I'd like to do is to thank Jason Giese. Like Billy said, I said yesterday that there were times when I wanted to wring Jason's neck, because I couldn't understand why he was thinking the way he was thinking. But truthfully, in the end, he stood up as a citizen of Prescott whose kids go to Prescott schools and who wants a future for Prescott. He stood up and helped it happen. So thank you to everyone. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I'm City Councilman Phil Good. I know a lot of people were concerned about my support or opinion on this letter of intent. Over those last couple of years, I've been meeting probably with every stakeholder group, whether it was Save the Dells, the Citizens Water Advocacy Group, the principals of Arizona Eco Development, to understand and listen and consider each and every one of those concerns. So over those 2 years, we've seen a contraction and expansion of expectation and asks and hopes from each one of those groups. And it had gotten to the point where I was really almost at the end of my rope to see if this would ever come together. But finally, I think we've reeled it back to a point that I think everyone who's involved here can see that we probably have the best that we can get from an agreement such as this. I've closely watched the development of water policy that everybody watching the deliberations of the council can certainly agree with. And we have to keep in mind that this is a letter of intent. Currently, it's not binding, and we will have to have a developmental agreement that will have much more detail. So if you know anything about my position, I will be looking very closely at those details to make sure that they're properly drafted and they meet the expectations of this letter of intent. So it's not the end of the line, but like the mayor is saying, I think we can see the end of the line ahead. So sometimes we focus totally on the southern section with the Save the Dells and the primary view shed in the Point of Rocks, being able to assure the wildlife corridor and the No Name Creek and some of the other access points to the public at large, I think is a major accomplishment. But we also have to consider the northern annexation as well, so that we can assure the future of our Prescott Regional Airport and its both expansion for economic activity around the airport services, and also the safety that will be involved in being able to handle larger, especially firefighting aircraft, etc., which is always a concern. So those details, again, are important and they have to be considered. So I know I've had some personal comments saying that we shouldn't even consider this, but you have to realize that this is private property rights. A lot of this property is privately owned, and it could be developed regardless of whether the city wants to move forward with this annexation and this agreement. So we don't have the authority to take this property, even though there are some people that expect us to be able to do that, and that's just not under the constitutional protections of private property rights. So we, I think, have made the best of the situation, and this now will have a chance to be reviewed once the developmental agreement is presented. Planning and zoning has got a number of meetings that they're going to have to go through, and being a previous commissioner and dealing with the Deepwell Ranch agreement, I'm going to try to help them and support them as much as I can to get through that process, and then we'll have a final agreement that we can feel pretty comfortable with, again, with all the principles involved. So I'm supportive of this letter of intent, and I will follow it closely to make sure it meets all the expectations once the details are taken into consideration. And again, I want to thank all the principals involved and all the hard work that was done, both with my council members, the mayor, all the principals, Arizona Eco, and I think at the end of the day, we're going to have something that we can all be proud of, both now and far into the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to speak today. As others have said, this is a long time coming, and I think it's a really exciting time that we're here today. It's been quite the roller coaster of emotions the last few years, a lot of feelings of optimism, and then a lot of times of doubt. And so it's nice to be, finishing this roller coaster on a feeling of optimism that we're moving forward in the right direction. I think the mayor mentioned that I think is important to note, that this letter of intent is kind of untraditional in the sense of talking about annexation processes. And so I hope that the public takes this time to read this letter of intent and understand our major goals moving forward, AED's major goals moving forward, so that there's a feeling of transparency. I think that's been a concern of the community, is that we haven't been transparent in this process, and this is an extra level of transparency. So I hope that the community really takes the time to read this, understand it, ask questions, and really so we're all on the same page as we move forward into the next steps of annexation. I'm very optimistic now. I'm very hopeful. I think that this is such a great opportunity for the city to acquire this land, to acquire land around the airport, to have some affordable housing in the northern annexation, a resort in the southern annexation. I mean, it's really a great deal. I hope that the stakeholders are happy. I'm sure they are. And so moving forward, I'm feeling very optimistic. So I think that kind of sums it up.
Thank you.
Well, words just escape me. I can't believe that we're here having this conversation, and I'm thrilled beyond belief. As you can see, I have my Save the Dells button on. And last year, when I was a candidate for city council, I was the only candidate that supported the position of Save the Dells, because Save the Dells had a vision. Today is about people who had a vision, and they had to work very hard to bring other people on the other side of the table around to embrace that vision for our community. And saving the heart of the Dells is a fabulous goal, and we have a lot more work to do on council and also work with our private property owners and our developers to hopefully maintain this vision and move forward. An annexation is actually a private property owner who comes to the city and agrees to modify his private property rights so that in exchange he can receive city services such as fire protection, police protection, roads, city water, city sewer, and have a quality development. So the private property owner actually comes to the city and agrees to negotiate with the city and will modify his private property rights. Or he is certainly welcome to stay in the county. But by asking for an annexation, his property values will double as far as being a private property owner and having more money in his pocket. And we have to realize that as elected officials, we need to protect the taxpayers and say, here's open space. This is what the taxpayers get in return for providing all those city services. So that's why we have an open space policy that requires 25% of open space in an annexation. And we required meaningful annexation, not just, if you look at the original plan that Mr. Giese presented, there was no vision, there was no meaningful protection of this beautiful area. And I just want to give a huge shout out to Save the Dells. They were like a hearty band who rose up, grassroots, local, and it snowballed. It struck a chord with the community. It motivated me to run. And I just want to thank all my supporters and thank all the Save the Dells people and the community for making this day happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you, council members. Before we go to questions, I just want to make clear what the next steps are here. So now that we have this LOI and it's in the public, we wanted to give an opportunity for the public to see it, to read it and react to it. And then we intend to bring it to the council. June 9th or the 16th are the two dates we're looking at. I'm hopeful that we could do June 9th at our first council meeting in June. There will be a vote on the LOI at that point, and then if there are, I'm assuming the applicant will be watching to see if there's at least 6 votes for a proof of life to move forward, because we need a supermajority when you get into the formal annexation process. That once that vote happens, then we're hopeful that it would move to planning and zoning late in June. I think the date is somewhere around June 24th for a meeting to start the process with planning and zoning. So that's kind of the next steps forward. And then, as we've already stated, it's going to go through the normal public process subject to Prop 400. So with that, we'll go to questions from the media. We covered it so well, there are none. Go ahead, and I'll just repeat the question. Yeah, good question. So the question is regarding the friendly condemnation of the 131 acres off the very end of the runway. And I'm going to let City Attorney John Palladini answer that for us.
The reason that the developer was requesting a friendly condemnation just gives them additional time under the IRS code to do what's called a like-kind exchange to basically reinvest the capital gains they have of that sale. So that's kind of the primary reason. The other reason, sort of tied to that purchase will be probably 95% funded by FAA and ADOT. So condemnation in that regard kind of helps push the process along a little quicker to help get that funding. So there's a benefit to the city too. It's a relatively simple process. It's friendly as it's basically an agreed upon condemnation.
Cindy? LOI? Sure. So the question is around the non-binding LOI, and could some of these major deal points, what did you, go away? Well, I would say definitely not go away. I would suggest to you that, like, for instance, we're talking about 745 acres plus or minus. So that number might move a few acres either way. And some of those kinds of things around the edges, you might see them change a little bit. But for the most part, we're trying to create these cornerstones of deal points that we feel like are not going to change. You know, we need to have some base level agreement where you may have a tiny bit of negotiation on a few things, or when you do a survey on the acreage, you might find that instead of 745, it's 748, or those kinds of things may change a little bit, but I don't see any major changes would be the intent of this LOI. Sure. Yeah, good question. So the question is around how or why is the water policy really coming into play to make this deal happen? Is that fair, Cindy? So when we talked about Section 33, that is the one area where the water policy really comes into play for us. That section has been disputed over the years of whether it's Prescott or Prescott Valley, or maybe it was half and half. And so it's kind of a dividing line between the two municipalities. And in my presentation earlier, I mentioned that it can really go three ways for development. As Councilman Good mentioned, the applicant has rights in the county right now. Without any public process, he could go out and begin developing his property. So the county is one option where he could develop it in the county. And then could be developed in Prescott or Prescott Valley, annexed into Prescott or Prescott Valley. For Prescott, it's a little more difficult because Section 32, just to the west of Section 33, is state land trust. And we would have to have a way to have contiguous, what am I trying to say, John? You have to have contiguous property to ensure that you can annex. We couldn't annex it currently because of Section 32. And so we're in a weaker position to negotiate because state land trust knows this, and so they're going to make it. They're only trying to get as much value out of their land as they can at this point for education in the state of Arizona. So we're in a weaker position to negotiate with state land trust to annex Section 33. We think Prescott Valley does make some sense, and the IGA that was just approved recently in our water policy that allowed Chino Valley to develop their commercial corridor would be the same kind of agreement, an IGA with Prescott Valley, that would allow us to serve water to Section 33. Did I stay in bounds? Okay. Right. So the water would have to run, the developer would have to pay to run the infrastructure of water and sewer to that section. Then, like I said, the town has to, or the developer has to comply with all of our city codes and regulations regarding water. There'd be a 30% surcharge, and then all of that effluent that's created by that development would come back to Prescott and be permanent recharge. Michael, do you have a thought?
So that's yet to be determined. Those are the three options for Section 33, but it is a part of the deal to provide water to the developer to develop that section with those three options. Did you have, okay. So right now, let me restate. The question is regarding the density of development in the South Annexation. Was that your question? Yeah, and also, well, I guess. Okay. So I'll let John actually speak to the number of units in those areas. Is that what you're looking for?
So in terms of densities or uses, the LOI actually lays out on the second page the potential densities. It talks about 850 residential units in the south, 200 resort units. It also then allocates a certain amount of water. And then on the north annexation, it talks about residential units, the W site, other units, and then the Granite Dells Parkway, and then the Section 33 is 1,000 residential units. So that lays out sort of the intended or planned densities. As the mayor was saying, those numbers can shift, but can't shift to increase density in the south, can shift from the south or from 33 to north or north to 33. And just let me make a real quick point. I think it's important, though, and that is, if we were to do an IGA with Prescott Valley, if Prescott Valley annexes 33, the IGA could be and would likely be limited to water just to Section 33 in a similar vein how we did an IGA with Chino Valley to allow water use only to a certain corridor. It wouldn't be a broad base, I don't think, a broad base IGA that would allow or that would provide Prescott water to all the rest of Prescott Valley. So I just want to make that clear.
I think that's a good point, and I was going to mention that as well, that the IGA, every IGA we do can be very, very specific, like John mentioned with Chino Valley. In this case, likely it would be just that section. It would be a number of units, and it is only residential. And that's very, very important, is the council here anticipates, well, a part of this LOI is that it's 1,000 residential units on Section 33 and not other areas. Anything else, Cindy? Bill? Right. So, yeah, thanks. Good question. So the question is, to get to a council vote, is there another meeting? We'll have a study session on this. Probably if we do it on the 9th, we'll have a study session to give plenty of time earlier prior to a 3 o'clock voting session on the 9th. And thanks for asking that question because, we're kind of coming out of this coronavirus situation and meeting is opening up. We anticipate by the time we do this to have at least 3 venues that will be opened and with spacing for the public to attend in person. 2 of those obviously would be satellite locations. Every one of those locations would have the ability to comment, public comment in every one of those venues. And then furthermore, we're working on a solution whereby people can be watching the live stream and then call in on a queue and be able to read their public comment or give their public comment from home or wherever they might be. We want to be sensitive to the public that's not yet ready to maybe come out or not able to because of health conditions. So we'll create all kinds of access for that meeting, for the study session and public comment before the voting session. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming. Have a great Memorial Day weekend.